friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. Money is out. If you follow the actions of Sheev Palpatine throughout his life, you're almost looking at two different people. In the beginning of his career, we have Senator Sheev Palpatine, the very likable representative from Naboo and the Travel sector. While Sheev keeps his actual political views very opaque, he's well liked in most political circles and functions almost like an unofficial whip in the Senate. Because why settle for just your vote when you can organize hundreds of votes? This very politically savvy and rational individual would take his brand of non-offensive politics to the very top of the executive branch during the Naboo crisis. Although little known to the wider Republic, Palpatine manages to leverage his whip skills into winning a special election and becomes the Chancellor of the Republic. Not elected necessarily by, public or popular opinion, but someone who was elected by his colleagues. Palpatine secured this win by appearing less dangerous and ambitious than other candidates and therefore presenting less of a threat. I'm sure a lot of people just thought, oh, this is just a special election. Palpatine will serve the remaining years of this term and then he'll move aside for a more qualified older statesman. So Palpatine actually proves to be extremely popular as the Chancellor of the Republic, and using that power, he skillfully navigates the Republican Jedi into the perfect position for their death and destruction. Palpatine was always several steps ahead of his enemies. The execution of Order 66 and the proclamation of the New Order were really political masterpieces. But then we have the second half of his life as Emperor Palpatine, and we're seeing almost a completely different individual, a despotic, superstitious, and paranoid person bent only on acquiring power for himself, no matter what the costs are, including his own life. The patience he once had is gone. He's unable to compromise with other individuals. It seems like a lot of the political skills and charisma he used to use all disappeared. Palpatine's ruinous political and economic policies, which we have covered in depth on this channel, there are literally hundreds of videos on this, led to a complete degradation of the imperial economy, finally resulting in its complete collapse. Now, I used to think that Palpatine's behavior could be explained by the massive amount of Sith lightning his face kind of absorbed, leading to some kind of traumatic brain injury and personality change. Because Palpatine just sort of went insane at the end and became his own biggest enemy. Nothing he did was really all that rational. But then I remembered the Darth Plagueis novel, which again is technically Legends, but I think it's almost like at this point a mandatory read if you really wanted to learn about the Clone Wars, or at least how the galaxy ended up fighting the Clone Wars. And actually, many aspects of the story have already been canonized, and more importantly, it provides a really in-depth political and economic look at how the Sith took over. It's fascinating, and I think it's one of the best novels out there for you guys to read if you are interested in this time period. In a lot of ways, like, you see how Andor kind of adds a lot of background story and understanding to the story of the Galactic Civil War. I would say that, the Plagueis novel does the same thing for the Clone Wars to a certain extent. I would also really love if they actually made it into a movie or a TV series. I know we're not gonna get Tony Gilroy back, but let's get someone at that same caliber, please, Disney. So at the center of the story is the mutant Sith Lord, Darth Plagueis, Palpatine's bastard. He comes from the finance world. He has a highly rational mind, and one can almost describe his lack of emotions as Jedi-like, as he applies the scientific methods to understanding how the Force works. He is, in my opinion, one of the most dangerous Sith Lords to ever, exist in the galaxy, probably second only to Vitiate, simply because he wasn't completely consumed by his emotions, anger, and rage. He was actually in control. Most Sith Lords are not. They're like crackheads or meth addicts. They can't get enough of the dark side stuff. Darth Plagueis, on the other hand, he was in complete control. As much as I like the Bane novels, Darth Bane is kind of an idiot. I mean, a lot of Sith are. Darth Bane is physically formidable. He's tough in the Force, but he leveraged his own antisocial tendencies and kind of made it the entire Sith faction's ideology. He was basically this outsider who was kind of weird and obsessed with violence and, kind of even made the other Sith uncomfortable. And because the other Sith didn't really like him and they liked cooperating with each other and share resources just like the Jedi, Bane actually believed that those practices allowed weaker Sith to gather together and overpower stronger Sith like him, which is really just a him problem. The Jedi Order arguably has much weaker individual fighters than the Sith, but generally they win wars because they can cooperate and work together. And so yeah, Bane was even too toxic for the Sith, which I find hilarious. And he starts this rule of two system where there can only be one master and one apprentice at a time. And this is really dumb because all you need is one weak link and the entire chain breaks. This actually happened on numerous occasions. There's like one Sith Lord who went to the light side almost, which is also hilarious, and almost destroyed the Sith. You see, Darth Bane's Rule of Two system was focused primarily on the transition of knowledge and power from one Sith to another, usually through combat. And also, posting memes on the internet where they proclaim to be like very loyal to their friends, but dangerous to their enemies. The only real positive thing that this system did was keep the Sith hidden from the Jedi. But in my opinion, I actually think Bane's Rule of Two system almost destroyed the Sith, and they're really lucky that they weren't destroyed. And I think their coming back out party was delayed hundreds of years because of this stupid Rule of Two philosophy. But of course, the system did work, but it didn't work because the Rule of Two system worked. It worked because Darth Plagueis was a genius, in my opinion. See, Plagueis merely saw the limitations of Darth Bane's system, and especially the part where he has to teach his apprentice well enough so that he can kill him. I mean, these are the Sith, and Bane should know this, but again, because he doesn't understand people, he has very low social intelligence, he doesn't foresee the problem of Sith being selfish. Anyway, so when Darth Plagueis killed his own master and took over his assets and projects, he altered the Rule of Two into something he believed was better and fit in his own strategy, which was to maintain power indefinitely. So when most people think about the Rule of Two, they think about, ambition and power dynamics between a master and an apprentice. One to embody power, the other to crave it. It sounds cool when you say it like that, but in practice, it creates a horrible relationship between two individuals that lacks trust and the ability to truly cooperate with one another. And Darth Plagueis, he wasn't a nice guy in any way, but he was rational. And I think if you're rational, you understand that cooperation, just basic morality, can help you a lot. And so what Plagueis and Sidious actually set up is something much more refined. It's just the division of labor. This was actually a true partnership, or at least Plagueis hoped that Sidious would understand that this is a mutually beneficial relationship he was creating. Plagueis was obsessed with finding the cure to death. He wanted it to be immortal, and Plagueis had hoped to share the secrets of life with Palpatine so that the two could rule together indefinitely. Because as a pragmatic and smart individual, Plagueis realized that he couldn't just do everything himself. He understood the need for someone to help him. He understood why people should cooperate, which is, I guess, not Sith-like enough for Palpatine, who was probably too young, a little bit too crazy, and a little too aggressive. And so he looked the gift force right in the mouth and killed it. You see, the division of labor that Plagueis wanted can also be described as power share. And really, you need to do this. I mean, this is the problem with every dictatorship. When you have someone trying to micromanage an entire company, an entire project, an entire nation or galaxy, it always ends up being a problem. See, in Plagueis' view, he was like, Marcus Crassus during the late Roman Republic era. While Caesar built political alliances and Pompey led the armies, Crassus funded the machine. He used debt and real estate speculation to gain influence over Rome's Senate. It's good to have someone focused just on the finances alone, because when you mix politics and finances too closely, sometimes your financial obligations will fall through because people are afraid of you politically. Similarly, Plagueis didn't posture a duel in public. He leveraged the intergalactic banking clan. He just focused on the finances. He funneled money into lobbying and infiltrated the economic arteries of the Republic and clogged the shit out of them. If you understand the financial system, how to use capital, you can be absolutely brutal. You can be brutally efficient at amassing power and influence without anyone even realizing it. Plagueis understood the Galactic Republic's biggest strength, its robust free markets, was also its greatest weakness, and the easiest thing to exploit and take over. If you appear over in Coruscant with the Sith Armada, the Republic's antibodies are going to kick into full gear and destroy you, as often happened to the Sith. If you tried to seize political control of the Republic without having the votes, antibodies will come out and kick you out again. The Sith were really never in a position to force the Republic to accept their rule, but the economic system is kind of open, right? If you have loosely regulated markets, a very laissez-faire attitude to how people generate money, you have a system that's almost asking for monopolies to occur, for large, powerful, companies or individuals to take control. A lot of words to describe it, efficient use of capital, consolidation. But it's the concentration of resources into one place, and an unregulated capitalist system always ends up in this kind of problem where it destroys itself. So Plagueis' idea is a lot different from actually attacking the Republic head on. What he wanted to do was change the system, the political and economic system, so that it actually favored the Sith and wanted the Sith in power. It's a smart move. And it was an easy thing to do if you had control of a lot of money, because money is really what makes the Republic run. And so you just make senators, planetary governors, and entire guilds benefit from your rise. So they will vote for you using the legal system. You had to tap into their greed and what truly keeps the Republic at peace, the flow of capital. Now, most people who play the financial game, right, they're just looking at money. They want to acquire more assets. They want to maybe control industry. That's fine. But if you throw in Sith Lord, a ruthlessly smart and efficient Sith Lord into the system that is looking for domination, I mean, it's all there. It's very easy for him to just take everything. I mean, if anything, most people in the business world are kind of spineless, right? They don't really tolerate risk well at all. They're more willing to fold very quickly. You throw in a Sith Lord into that mix, and it's going to be a mess. It's going to be a bloodbath. So, the Darth Plagueis novel offers a really detailed blueprint for how Plagueis began quietly reshaping the galaxy. So if you want more individual mentions and events, I definitely recommend again you read this. So Plagueis was born Higo Damask, a Mun who was the son of a mid-level executive in the IGBC. The Sith would make a lot of arrangements that his father wasn't even aware of, and he would end up rising up in the ranks pretty high, bringing Higo Damask with him. Using his position in the banking clans, Darth Plagueis didn't just fund political campaigns, he actually bought senators. Entire voting blocks in the Republic Senate were indebted to him. Of course, no one ever knew his name or even saw his face. People rarely dealt with him directly. There was always kind of a cloud moving around Plagueis, shells and layers of different companies and organizations that obscured his actual hand in things. So yeah, Plagueis combined his very solid understanding of the financial system and some, I'm sure, pretty basic capital growth strategies that a lot of other people were using, and he used that to generate massive mental resources that basically were driven to destabilize the galaxy. This wasn't a military coup, this wasn't an attack, it was just a financial takeover. An incremental takeover, the power centers of the galaxy far away from the prying eyes of the media and the ordinary voter. Plagueis didn't loot entire planets of resources, killing off indigenous people, stirring up outrage. He didn't land his Star Cruiser on the Gormans peacefully assembling in the square. He simply would do things like set his interest rates through his puppets in the IGBC at the right time to benefit his own business deals, or at the right time to pressure heavily indebted sovereigns or companies to fold. I mean, the average person couldn't even explain what the hell Plagueis was doing that was illegal, because what he was doing wasn't necessarily or technically illegal. He was just pulling all the strings. And that's what happens when you get to a certain level, I think. When you're at the top of the system, there's really no one above you to keep their eyes on you. Right? Plagueis was smart in how he approached the takeover of the galaxy. He had a large toolkit and plenty of resources to deploy. He could influence regulations and rates on trade routes and organize trade deals between two entities. He shut out people who were antagonistic, were not aiding his longer-term goals, and he had his hand in every part of the supply chain, from resource extraction to design to manufacturing, transport, and retail, and therefore, he always had an angle to attack politicians or corporate leaders that stood in the way of the Sith. He even funneled money into criminal organizations like the Star Combine to further create chaos in the galaxy, with a special focus on the Outer Rim, where tensions continued to rise between the core and the peripherals. That same tension would lead to the Clone Wars, and it was honestly relatively easy for Plagueis to achieve all of this. It's extremely easy to be negative. It's easy to tear down things, whether it's Star Wars or the government, and anyone can really do it. It's much harder to rebuild a system that actually works, that is better than the current system. And in today's news cycle, I think we have a media cycle, a political world that is full of descriptors. Populists who say crazy things about what they can achieve, and obviously when they get into power, not only do they lack basic understanding of governance, they're just completely immoral and incompetent. Yeah, it's horrific. Now, a decade before the Clone Wars started, Plagueis would do a test run for the conflict. He would choose to destabilize the planet of Naboo, a key mid-rim system that many large corporations in the region had business interests on. The Sith activated their agents within the Trade Federation and started a conflict that sparked a huge populist backlash against these large Outer Rim companies that exploited labor and now were blockading planets. This, of course, was all manufactured behind the scenes. I mean, the Trade Federation didn't even know this because they were kind of the suckers in the situation. What the Sith wanted to do was to manufacture outrage against the large corporate entities in the Outer Rim. They wanted the Republic voter to be more open to the idea of a strongman authoritarian leader who could actually cut through the bureaucracy and solve all the problems. Of course, Darth Plagueis is immune. He's also not a very charismatic immune, especially after he survived an assassination attempt that left him disfigured. And so, this is when he activates his young apprentice, the senator of the Chamal sector, to replace Chancellor Valorum after a vote of no confidence passes through the Senate. Here's when we start diverging from the canon timeline. This is almost like a what-if scenario. Imagine an empire built by Plagueis, not Sidious. This would not be an empire of fear or the Tarkin doctrine. There would be no super weapons. Plagueis didn't need a Death Star because he's not an idiot. He wouldn't waste trillions on a moon-sized cannon, and a few trillion credits in debt restructuring could flip a system overnight. Sure, Plagueis will do a lot of evil things because he's a Sith. He'll steal resources, exploit labor, your typical evil corpo stuff. But he won't just be doing it for the sake of being evil, like Palpatine and all of his ridiculous goons with serious childhood trauma. No, Plagueis would take that money and he would fill the government coffers. He would strengthen his own position in the executive. Forget about space fascism. Think more space neoliberalism, but driven by a technocratic Sith Lord far more formidable and hard to stop. It's not as bad on a daily basis, but it's a lot worse because I don't think the revolution would ever wake up in that kind of system. He would keep the Senate, at least informed, maintain the illusion of planetary sovereignty. He'd regulate the Jedi into obsolescence, tie them up in legal bureaucracy, and quietly turn the public against them over a decade or two. There won't even need to be an Order 66 at all. The Jedi would simply be, disfunded. It's kind of like how in America, for some reason over the years, we've grown to really not trust or hate government workers. Not the government and the systems, but like the actual individual workers, which is really f***ed up in my opinion. In reality, people who work for the government are oftentimes just ordinary people. A lot of them are actually really nice and kind people. I think there's less ambition in these circles, which is fine, and there's more of a love for service of community, which I think is excellent. It's just the systems that they work under are so convoluted and inefficient that it makes them seem like bad or lazy workers, when in reality, the system itself is really the problem, and not giving them the tools to solve whatever freaking IRS problems being thrown at your face. The truth is we actually need more government spending. And I consider myself kind of a fiscal conservative in some ways. And the reality is, if you understand the actual problems with our government right now, it's really like inefficiency, outdated systems that are costing us so much money. We need to actually invest more money in our government, upgrade our IT systems, all these portals that we have to interact with. Like, who's called the IRS in the last few months? You can't get a hold of them. Over the years, for some reason, we stopped thinking government can do anything. And so we've orchestrated an even worse system where instead of trying to fix the government's problems, we just outsource everything to contractors, even things that really should be kept internal. But it costs money to develop people, right? To train people, to create entire new departments. And it's not popular, especially in this fiscal environment, to say I need millions and billions of dollars to overhaul all these systems. And so there is no long-term thinking in America right now. There's no long-term investments. And so we rely on what seems to be cheaper contractors, but in the long run, it costs us more money. And I have to point out, people who say that government employees are corrupt and adding to the deficit and are just stealing, it's widely untrue. It demoralizes people who are actually trying to help run our country. And it also spreads a terrible political message. It brings partisan politics into a place where there used to be none. And here's the craziest thing. As a country, we spend only $300 to $400 billion on employing federal workers. It sounds like a lot, but you know how much we spend on contractors? Close to $700 to $800 billion. It's almost twice as much. And some of those positions are necessary. I mean, contractors aren't bad people necessarily. They're just like anyone else, right? I'm not against contractors, but there are certain things that we're asking contractors to do, like IT work, accounting work, security, that totally should be kept internal. And again, we need to make long-term investments. to create long-term savings. But yeah, no financial planning anymore, just populism. It's extremely easy to rile up people if you have a platform, if you can reach out there. I mean, I've created a platform of hatred against dolphins, right? And it was very easy to do. So as you can see, it's very easy to rile up people, get them angry at the government employees or at the contractors, when in reality, it's really the people who perpetuate this system that are to be blamed. And more importantly, these so-called conservatives with no fiscal responsibility are looting the government, lining the pockets of their corporate friends, and what else are they doing? Oh yeah, they're sending us towards a deficit cliff that we probably won't be able to recover from unless we suffer a lot. Of course, they won't suffer. The ordinary person will suffer. The modality of evil, the slow-moving, massive oppression that gradually takes over the galaxy during the early empire, is exactly how Plagueis would have kept things moving. Plagueis would have been a master at spreading discontent amongst the various social classes that make up the empire. He'd make sure that people were fighting each other too much to actually pay attention to what he was doing. Luthen's line about the Empire choking us so slowly we're starting not to notice would be a little more prophetic. Revolutions don't start when people feel oppressed, they actually start when they feel robbed or directly messed with. Palpatine's Empire really went out of their way to do the latter for no other reason than because, let's be honest, the Sith are their own worst enemies, and evil, thuggish people are generally just stupid and bring their own demise because they're just too terrible to be allowed to let live. Under Plagueis' empire, no one would know about the Sith's presence. I mean, Plagueis wouldn't even need stormtroopers to keep the peace. I think he could just convince the people to keep the peace themselves. When Sidious kills Plagueis in his sleep, it feels like the ultimate Sith move. Power usurping power. But in hindsight, it might have been the galaxy, or at least the Sith's greatest loss, because Palpatine screwed the Sith by doing this. Sidious lacked the restraint his master had, that much is clear. He craved dominance and not durability. I mean, he turns the Republic into the Empire practically overnight, wipes out the Jedi in a single move, and builds a surveillance state powered by fear, and it's impressive. But like many things Palpatine does, he's actually not responsible for this plan. Plagueis created this plan. And I think once Plagueis' plan kind of runs its course and Palpatine is left on his own, he starts screwing up. Like, he disbands the Senate way too early. The regional governors he appoints are way too corrupt. I mean, there's no checks and balances, and so they're tanking the local economy, stealing money from the locals, and that just increases the rebellion's strength. Palpatine also wastes unfathomable resources on symbolic terror weapons with no strategic use. He even scraps a perfectly fine Republic Navy and army that he inherited and rebuilds an arguably inferior one at a huge cost. And then finally, he puts an emotionally unstable Sith Lord in a suit of armor in hopes that he could somehow hold the galaxy together through pure intimidation rather than just relying on good governance. When you put it like that, I mean, Darth Sidious is not only just like stupid, he's incompetent. It's like in Iron Man 3 when it's revealed that the Mandarin was just some stupid actor portrayed by Ben Kingsley. Palpatine is definitely more skilled and ambitious than that individual, but not really by much. It's easy to think of Darth Sidious as the pinnacle of Sith power, because he does take over the entire galaxy. We cannot take that away from him. He executed the plan well. But you look closer and you start seeing the cracks, the emotional volatility, the lack of long-term thinking. His ego was also just completely out of control. This was not sustainable. Plagueis, on the other hand, wasn't interested in being remembered. He just wanted the Sith to win forever. But his own weakness, his fear of death, his inability to read humans, made him make a fatal flaw, trusting Sidious. In many ways, Sidious's ascension to the throne is just like a failure in succession planning on the Sith's part. The apprentice took over before the job was done, and the apprentice was just not ready. And the galaxy and the Sith paid the price. It's like when Yeltsin brought along Putin and he thought, oh, this is just a easy to control bureaucrat. Like, he's not going to do anything crazy. Just like so many China watchers also thought Xi Jinping would be a reformer. Like Palpatine, these political leaders were carefully saying what people wanted to hear until they finally secured power for themselves and revealed their true intentions. So next time someone quotes the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise, you have to understand that the tragedy isn't necessarily Plagueis' death. It's the plans that he had created that were never fulfilled fully. Because if he had finished what he started, I think the galaxy would have never known war. The Galactic Civil War would have never happened. The rebellion would have probably never happened either. There would have just been quiet, efficient control, ruthlessly tight governance, and a shadow that ruled everything. It's not a galaxy that I would want to live in, of course, but one could definitely make the argument that it would probably be a better outcome than what actually ends up happening with the Galactic Civil War, the rise of the New Republic. It's all the First Order War and all the other crazy stuff that happens. That's some uncomfortable food for thought. The potential that a kind of very organized, evil authoritarian could bring more peace and stability than a well-meaning rebellion in the Republic. Well, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, guys, just because I'm saying that Plagueis might have done a better job doesn't mean that my name isn't Alan and that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy, the least worst system that we've tried so far. Let's hope it keeps going.